Let's talk about marriage. At its best, it's this incredibly profound, sacred union, a real celebration of love, of partnership. But what happens when that beautiful ritual gets twisted, when a tradition becomes a transaction, a social burden that comes with a truly devastating human cost? Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. That tension, and maybe, just maybe, a path to reclaiming its real meaning.
So everything really starts with this ideal, right? The source material frames marriage as something holy, a viva yajna, which is like a sacred fire ceremony. It's meant to be this pure spiritual partnership, and that's the beautiful theory. But the reality, as we're about to see, well, it's a whole different story. And boom, here's the brutal reality check. Just look at these numbers, pulled straight from the source. They track suicides directly linked to dowry harassment. In just a few years, it jumps from 600 to over 4,000. That is just staggering. And that's not just a statistic, you guys. That is an epidemic of despair. It's a total perversion of that sacred ideal we just talked about.
So this really gets to the heart of the problem. How did we even get here? How does a holy union, this celebration of two people coming together, devolve into a cold, hard financial transaction where a human life is just another number on a balance sheet?
The source text lays out the logic here, and honestly, it's chilling. For some families, the death of a new bride isn't seen as a tragedy. No, it's a business opportunity. It completely resets the board, you see? It allows for a new marriage, and more importantly, a new and potentially bigger dowry. This mindset is the engine that drives so much of this horror. Now, you might think you know who to blame, but the source actually spreads it around in a pretty surprising way. Of course, it's easy to point the finger at the groom's family for their greed, but the text argues that the bride's side is often part of the problem too. By prioritizing a groom's wealth and his status over his actual character, they're accidentally feeding the very system that devalues their own daughters. It becomes this vicious cycle, trapping everybody in a purely transactional mindset.
Okay, so beyond all the cold calculations and the social pressures, we have to confront the ultimate price of this corrupted system, the violent and far too often fatal outcomes for thousands and thousands of young women.
And these aren't just abstract ideas. The source gives us their names. Kamlesh, who was doused in petrol and set on fire by her own husband. Hardeep Kaur, a 21-year-old mother, burned alive with kerosene by her in-laws. And you have to remember, these are just the stories that make it into the reports. Countless others are pushed to suicide, seeing it as the only way out from the relentless torment.
The human cost is it's horrifying. But it's all tangled up with another kind of devastation. An absolutely staggering level of economic waste. The pressure to put on this grand show, this huge celebration, is literally bankrupting families.
Just try to wrap your head around this number for a second. 280 billion rupees. According to the source's estimates, that's what's spent every single year on weddings. And that's not an investment in the couple's future. Nope, that's just money spent on the party itself. And this slide really puts it all into perspective. That $280 billion, it's more than 4 times the entire annual national budget that's cited in the source material. Just imagine what could be done with that wealth, investing in schools and hospitals and infrastructure. Instead, it's pretty much just set on fire for a few days of spectacle.
So, where does all that money go? Well, the source breaks it down, and this is the really critical part. Only about a quarter of it is the actual cash dowry. The other 75%, the vast majority, is spent on temporary displays of status. We're talking feasts, decorations, gifts, music. It's all just for show.
And here is the ultimate tragic irony. In the end, nobody actually wins. The bride's family is often completely ruined, paying for everything. And the groom's family? Well, they often spend whatever they get, and then some, just to host their side of the party and keep up appearances. It's this massive transfer of wealth that somehow manages to leave both families broke. Now, this crushing financial pressure from dowries and these over-the-top weddings, it doesn't just lead to debt. It leads to really desperate calculations. And as the source points out, it's one of the main drivers behind another deeply harmful tradition, child marriage. This quote from Swami Ram Tirtha, man, it just hits you right in the gut. You know a bonsai tree, right? It's kept artificially small, its growth is deliberately stunted. He's arguing that by forcing marriage and all these adult responsibilities onto kids, society is doing the exact same thing to its own people, creating these bonsai humans who are never allowed to fully grow. The psychological damage is it's profound. The source explains that a 10-year-old, once they're married, is immediately expected to act and think like they're 25. They basically have to mentally leapfrog over their entire adolescence, their education, the whole process of figuring out who they are. Their childhood is simply erased. Gone.
Okay, so one of the big justifications you hear for this is that it prevents teenage immorality. But the source just completely shuts that argument down. It argues that a person's character isn't shaped by whether or not they got married at age 12. It's shaped by their environment, their education, the media they see, the values they're actually taught. Forcing them into a marriage is a simplistic fix that completely ignores the real root of the issue.
So, we've seen the corruption, the violence, the waste, the stolen childhoods. It can feel completely hopeless, right? Like these traditions are just too dug in to ever change. But the source material doesn't just leave us in despair. It actually offers a way forward, a kind of blueprint for taking back the sanctity of marriage.
And this is the question on everyone's mind, isn't it? I mean, it's one thing for one person to say no, but then you risk being cast out by your whole community. How do you fight something that feels like it's woven into the very fabric of society? Well, the answer, it turns out, is that you don't fight it alone. And check this out. The source gives us this fantastic real-world example from a village called Alawalper. It shows exactly how this can work. And it didn't start with some new law from the government. It started with a simple conversation among young people at a tea shop. That conversation grew into a village-wide meeting where everyone took a collective oath. Then they set new, simple rules for everybody. A symbolic gift, a tiny guest list, and this part is key, they created a committee to hold each other accountable. This table just lays it out so perfectly. The fear that one person feels on their own, that's overcome by a community oath. That immense social pressure to spend a fortune, it's replaced by new, simple rules that apply to every single person. And the lack of enforcement that makes so many official laws useless, that's solved by a local committee that has real social power. It's a grassroots solution that tackles the problem at its core.
So in the end, the source leaves us with this really powerful thought. The laws are on the books. People know how much harm this causes. They know these customs are destructive. The only missing ingredient, really, is courage. But as the people of Aliwalpur showed us, when a community's conscience finally awakens and they find that courage together, even the most deeply rooted harmful traditions can start to fall apart. The only question left is, who's next?